He arrived in Manila with a $3,000 leather briefcase and a heart made of cold, calculated stone. Julian Thorne was a man who measured the world in quarterly dividends and hourly rates, a man who believed that if a problem couldn't be solved with a wire transfer, it wasn't worth his time. He didn't come to the Philippines for the sunsets or the white sand beaches. He came to close a struggling manufacturing plant and terminate the livelihoods of 400 people without blinking an eye. He saw the bustling chaos of the city as a lack of discipline and the smiles of the workers as a sign of inefficiency. But Julian was about to learn that while he owned the world, he was spiritually bankrupt, and his salvation wouldn't come from a boardroom. It would come from a flooded street and a woman who had nothing left to give but her grace. The greatest lessons in life often arrive when we are at our lowest, stripped of the titles and bank accounts that define us. In the heart of the Philippines, Julian would discover that wealth isn't what you gather, but what you scatter. If you believe that a single act of kindness can change the trajectory of a human life, then subscribe to our journey as we explore the stories that mend the soul. This is a story of how a man who had everything realized he was actually starving. Julian stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his penthouse suite, looking down at the shimmering lights of Makati with a sense of clinical detachment. To him, the city was a spreadsheet, rows of skyscrapers representing capital, and the sprawling neighborhoods between them representing labor costs to be minimized. He adjusted his silk tie, his reflection revealing a man who had mastered the art of the clean cut. He was here to execute a restructuring, a corporate euphemism for ending dreams. He found the humid air stifling and the persistent sound of distant karaoke a nuisance to his focus. He had no interest in the local culture, dismissing the Filipino pangsyong for long goodbyes and festive gatherings as a waste of productive time. He believed in the Western gospel of speed and isolation. He was a self-made island, and he liked it that way. He viewed the concept of pakikisama, the Filipino desire for harmony, as a weakness that kept businesses from reaching their true potential. But the tropical sky has a way of humbling the arrogant. On the afternoon he was set to sign the final closure papers, the heavens opened with a violence Julian had never witnessed. A sudden, relentless monsoon transformed the streets into rivers within minutes. His black car service was trapped 3 miles from the plant, and his phone, his lifeline to his empire, died a cold, digital death after a water-damaged charging port flickered out. Stranded on a street corner as the sun began to set, soaked to the bone in a suit that cost more than most people earn in a year, Julian felt a creeping, unfamiliar sensation: vulnerability. The traffic was a deadlocked sea of colorful jeepneys and splashing tricycles, and for the first time in 20 years, the billionaire was just a man standing in the rain, invisible and powerless against the elements. He ducked under a rusted corrugated metal awning of a small sari-sari store, shivering and coughing. He looked at the locals around him, people huddling together, sharing umbrellas, laughing despite the chaos, and he felt a surge of resentment. He was a king without a throne, shivering under a leaking roof, waiting for a world he thought he controlled to give him a sign, yet the only thing that greeted him was the smell of wet pavement and the realization that his money couldn't buy a dry path home. As the deluge continued, Julian's shivering became uncontrollable. He was miles from his hotel, his lungs burning from the damp air, and the slowness of the Philippines he had so recently mocked was now his reality. He felt a hand on his elbow, a light, tentative touch. It was an elderly woman, her face a map of deep-set wrinkles, wearing a faded house dress and plastic slippers. She didn't see a CEO. She saw a man who looked like he was breaking. Without a word, she guided him away from the spray of the street and into a modest wooden home that sat precariously on stilts. Inside, the floor was clean but bare, and the air smelled of wood smoke and ginger. Julian felt a surge of his old arrogance. He didn't want charity, and he certainly didn't want to be in a shack. But as he looked around, he saw 5 children sharing a single small space, their eyes wide and curious, yet filled with a warmth he hadn't seen in a Manhattan boardroom in a decade. The woman, whom the children called Lola, disappeared into a small corner and returned with a bowl of steaming arroz caldo and an old, dented tin of biscuits. It was the last of their food for the evening. Julian watched in stunned silence as the family moved with a fluid, unspoken grace, the older children helping the younger ones, everyone making room for the stranger who had landed in their midst. This was Malasakit in its purest form, the radical act of caring for a stranger as if they were kin. The woman pressed a warm bowl into his cold, trembling hands. She had no idea he was a man who had signed the papers to take away the factory jobs in the next town over. To her, he was simply a neighbor in the storm of life. As the savory warmth of the ginger and rice hit his tongue, Julian felt a lump in his throat that had nothing to do with the flu. He looked at the tin of biscuits, half empty, yet offered with such abundance, and realized that these people, who lived on less than his daily coffee budget, possessed a wealth of spirit that made his bank account look like a hollow shell. His walls didn't just crack, they shattered. The next morning, the floodwaters had receded, leaving behind a city coated in silt but buzzing with the resilient energy of a people who refused to stay down. Julian stood outside the modest hut, his expensive suit wrinkled and stained, but his eyes were clearer than they had been in years. He looked at Lola and her grandchildren, who were already busy sweeping the mud from their doorstep, greeting the day with a magandang umaga and a smile that defied their circumstances. He realized that for his entire career he had been building walls of glass, of gold, of ego, while these people built bridges. He thought of the factory workers he had planned to discard like broken machinery. He saw them now not as line items on a ledger, but as fathers, sisters, and Lolas. The internal shift was seismic. He understood that his efficiency was actually a form of blindness, and that the true measure of a man's success is the strength of the community he supports, not the isolation of the wealth he hoards. Julian did not go to the office to sign the closure papers that day. Instead, he arrived at a factory and called an assembly. He didn't speak of restructuring or dividends. He spoke of Bayanihan, the spirit of communal unity he had witnessed in a flooded alley. He announced that the plant would stay open, not as a charity, but as a partnership. He committed to investing in the workers' families, ensuring that the kindness shown to him by a stranger would be repaid 1,000-fold through Utang Na Lube, the sacred debt of gratitude that bind hearts together. As he finally boarded his flight back to New York, his $3,000 briefcase felt lighter, despite being filled with nothing but a few local souvenirs and that same empty tin of biscuits Lola had insisted he keep. He looked out the window at the archipelago below, no longer seeing a series of obstacles, but a home he had finally discovered. He came to the Philippines to fire his staff, but he left realizing that he was the one who had finally been hired by humanity itself. The story of Julian Thorne reminds us that the most valuable things in life aren't things at all. It is the warmth of a shared meal, the shelter of a stranger's roof, and the realization that we are all interconnected by a thread of kindness that no storm can wash away. The Philippines is a way of stripping away the mask we wear, revealing the heart that beats beneath the suit. It teaches us that to be truly rich is to have a soul that is open to the needs of others. Have you ever experienced a moment of unexpected kindness from a stranger that changed the way you see the world? We would love to hear your story in the comments below. If this journey touched your heart, please like and share this video. And remember, in a world where you can be anything, be kind.